My name is Sophia, and I'm 28 years old. 3 months ago, I won $50 million in the lottery. But I didn't tell anyone. Instead, I pretended I was broke. What happened next destroyed my family and saved my life. I'm sitting in my new apartment right now. It's nothing fancy from the outside. 3 bedrooms in a quiet neighborhood, but it's mine, completely mine. No family drama, no guilt trips, no one asking for handouts they feel entitled to. The lottery ticket is still in my jewelry box, crumpled and faded now. I bought it at the gas station on Maple Street, the same station where I'd been buying coffee every morning for 2 years, working my dead-end job at the insurance office, living paycheck to paycheck like everyone expected me to forever. You know that feeling when your whole world shifts in an instant? When everything you thought you knew about people gets turned upside down? That's what this story is about. It's about discovering who really loves you, and who just loves what you can give them. I need to tell you this story because it changed everything. The way I see family, the way I see myself, the way I understand what loyalty really means. And if you're dealing with toxic family dynamics, this might help you see things differently too. The morning I checked my numbers, I was sitting in my tiny studio apartment. Coffee getting cold. Bills spread across my kitchen table like a puzzle I couldn't solve. Rent was due in 3 days. I had $47 in my checking account. My sister Emma had already texted twice asking to borrow money for her kids' school supplies. I almost didn't check the ticket. I'd been buying them for months. Never won more than $5. But something told me to look. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was fate. The first number matched. Then the second. By the third number, my hands were shaking. By the 5th number, I couldn't breathe. All 6 numbers. Perfect match. $50 million after taxes. I stared at that ticket for 20 minutes. I called the lottery office 3 times just to make sure it was real. They confirmed it. I was officially a millionaire, 50 times over. But here's the thing. Instead of celebrating, I felt scared. Not excited, scared. Because I knew my family. I knew how they treated money, how they treated each other when money was involved. And I realized I had a choice to make. I could tell them immediately and watch everything change. Or I could wait. Test the waters. See who they really were when they thought I had nothing to give. When they had to decide whether to love me or help me based purely on family bonds, not financial ones. If you're watching this right now, drop a comment letting me know where you are viewing from. Before I tell you about this life-changing decision, hit like and subscribe to hear more real stories about family loyalty and betrayal that might just change how you see your own relationships. So I made a choice that would reveal everyone's true colors. I decided to pretend I was completely broke, to tell them I'd lost my job, that I needed help, that I was struggling more than ever. I wanted to see who would step up, who would offer genuine support, who would show me real family love. What I discovered broke my heart, but it also set me free. Let me tell you about my family. The people who raised me to believe blood is thicker than water. The people who taught me that family always comes first. The people who I thought would always have my back. My parents, David and Linda, live in the house I grew up in. A modest 3-bedroom ranch with a mortgage they've been struggling with for 15 years. Dad works construction when his back allows it. Mom cleans houses for wealthy families across town. They're good people, hard-working people. But money has always been tight. Growing up, I learned that asking for things meant causing stress. New school clothes meant overtime shifts for Dad. Family vacations were day trips to the lake with sandwiches packed in old bread bags. We made it work. We were happy. Or so I thought. My older brother Marcus is 32. He's got 2 kids, with his ex-wife Sarah. He drives truck for a living and barely makes child support. Marcus always had this edge to him, this bitterness about how life turned out. He'd make comments about successful people, call them lucky or fake or undeserving. Deep down, I think he resented anyone who had more than him. Then there's my younger sister, Emma. She's 25 with 3 kids under 8. Her husband, Jake, works part-time at a warehouse. They live in a trailer park outside town. Emma's always been the dramatic one. Everything is a crisis. Every problem requires immediate family intervention. She's borrowed money from all of us more times than I can count. My Aunt Carol is Mom's sister. She's divorced and bitter about it. Lives alone with her cats and her opinions about everyone else's life choices. Carol always positioned herself as the family wisdom keeper, the one who saw through people's facades. She prided herself on being brutally honest, which usually meant being brutal. Uncle Mike is Dad's younger brother. He's a mechanic who owns his own shop. He's the only one in our family with real money. Mike always made sure we knew he was successful. He'd show up to family gatherings in new trucks, talk about his investments, make subtle comments about everyone else's financial choices. Then there's Grandma Rose. She's 83 and sharp as a tack. She lives in an assisted living facility that costs more than my parents' mortgage. Uncle Mike pays for it, which he mentions frequently. Grandma Rose raised 5 kids during the Depression. She has stories about real poverty, real struggle. She's always been my favorite person in the family. Finally, there's my cousin Jessica. She's Marcus's age, but acts 20 years younger. Jessica works at a salon and lives with her boyfriend in a tiny apartment. She's always been jealous of anything good that happens to anyone else. If someone gets a promotion, she finds a way to diminish it. If someone buys something nice, she questions whether they can afford it. This is the family I thought I knew, the people I trusted, the people I would have done anything for. Before I won the lottery, I saw them as flawed but loving. I made excuses for their behaviors. I overlooked their patterns. I focused on the good memories and ignored the red flags. But money has a way of revealing truth. It strips away pretenses, shows people's real priorities, real values, real character. And I was about to learn some very painful lessons about the people I called family. The plan I hatched was simple but comprehensive. I would tell each family member privately that I'd lost my job, that I was struggling financially, that I might need help. Then I'd watch their reactions. Listen to their words, pay attention to their actions, or lack thereof. I started with small tests, casual mentions of financial stress, comments about struggling to pay bills, hints that I might need support. The responses were eye-opening, not in a good way. Most of them immediately changed the subject, made excuses about their own financial situations. Or worse, they seemed almost satisfied that I was struggling too, like my problems made them feel better about their own situations, like misery truly does love company. But I needed to go deeper. I needed to create real scenarios, real opportunities, for them to show who they were when the chips were down, when their sister, daughter, niece, and granddaughter needed actual help. Not money, just support, just family love, just someone to care. Have you ever tested the people closest to you? Have you ever wondered who would actually be there when you needed them most? Not for celebrations or good times, but for real struggles? For genuine crisis moments? Keep watching because what I discovered will probably shock you as much as it shocked me. I started my experiment 2 weeks after winning. The lottery money was safely deposited in a new account at a different bank. I kept living in my studio apartment, kept driving my old Honda, kept shopping at discount stores. Nothing about my lifestyle changed, but everything about my family interactions was about to shift dramatically. My first test was with my parents. I called them on a Sunday evening, They were watching television. Dad answered the phone with his usual gruff hello. I told them I'd been laid off from the insurance office, that I was worried about making rent, that I didn't know what I was going to do. The silence stretched for several seconds. Then Mom got on the line. Instead of comfort or concern, she immediately started lecturing me about saving money, about being more responsible, about how I should have seen this coming. Dad chimed in with comments about how tough the job market was, how I might need to lower my expectations, how I should consider moving back home. Moving back home. Into their spare bedroom. At 28 years old, after living independently for 6 years. They weren't offering support. They were offering judgment disguised as practical advice, and the subtle implication that my failure was somehow predictable, expected even. But here's what really hurt. They didn't ask how I was feeling. They didn't ask what kind of help I needed. They didn't offer to help me look for jobs. They just assumed I'd failed because of personal shortcomings. And they seemed almost relieved to have their assumptions confirmed. Next, I tested Marcus. I met him at a diner downtown, told him about losing my job, about struggling to pay bills, about feeling lost and scared. Marcus nodded sympathetically, made supportive sounds. Then he started talking about his own problems. His truck needed repairs. His ex-wife was demanding more child support. His landlord was raising rent. After 20 minutes, I realized he hadn't asked a single question about my situation, hadn't offered any help or support. He'd just used my crisis as an opportunity to dump his own problems on me, like we were in competition for who had it worse, like my struggles were somehow taking attention away from his struggles. When I pressed him directly about whether he could help me network for jobs, he got defensive, started making excuses about not knowing anyone in my field, about being too busy with his own work, about how networking wasn't really his thing. Translation: he couldn't be bothered to help his sister find employment. Emma's test was the most revealing. I called her crying. Really crying. I told her I was scared about becoming homeless, about not being able to afford food, about feeling completely alone. Her first response was to ask if I could still watch her kids next weekend. Her second response was to suggest I apply for food stamps and government assistance. She didn't offer to help me look for work, didn't invite me for dinner to save money, didn't even offer emotional support. She just wanted to make sure my crisis wouldn't interfere with her free babysitting. And she seemed genuinely confused when I got upset about her priorities. But the real shock came when I tested Uncle Mike, the successful one, the one with money, the one who constantly reminded us about his financial stability. I swallowed my pride and asked him for a temporary loan, $500 to make rent. I promised to pay him back as soon as I found work. Mike laughed. Actually laughed. He said I needed to learn to manage money better. That lending money to family was how you destroyed relationships. That I should ask my parents for help since I was their responsibility. Then he launched into a lecture about personal accountability and poor life choices. This from the man who spent more on truck accessories than I was asking to borrow. Who regularly spent hundreds at family gatherings on alcohol and expensive steaks. Who bragged about his vacation expenses. But $500 to help his niece avoid homelessness? That was asking too much. Aunt Carol's response was perhaps the most painful. She didn't just refuse to help. She seemed delighted by my misfortune. She made comments about how she'd always worried I was too confident, too independent, how maybe this would teach me some humility, how struggling would build my character. She turned my crisis into a life lesson, like I was a child who needed to learn consequences, like my fear and desperation were somehow deserved, like watching me struggle was entertainment for her, a validation of her cynical worldview. Even my cousin Jessica found ways to make my situation about her. She complained that my job loss reminded her of her own career insecurities. She worried that if I moved back with my parents, family gatherings would be awkward. She suggested maybe I should consider moving to another city, starting fresh somewhere else, away from the family. The pattern became clear. Nobody wanted to help. But worse than that, nobody seemed to genuinely care. They were all too busy with their own problems, too focused on their own struggles, too worried about how my situation might affect them, to actually see me as a person who needed support. I was their family member in crisis, and their response was to distance themselves, to protect their own interests, to avoid any responsibility for my well-being. It was like discovering I was surrounded by strangers who shared my DNA but not my values. But there was one exception. One person who responded completely differently. And that person changed everything about how I understood family and love and loyalty. Someone who proved that real family isn't about blood relations. It's about choosing to care when caring is difficult. Grandma Rose was different from day one. When I called to tell her about losing my job, she didn't lecture me. She didn't make excuses. She didn't talk about her own problems. She asked one simple question. "What do you need, sweetheart?" I started crying right there on the phone. Not because I was sad, but because someone finally cared enough to ask. Someone finally saw my crisis as something worth addressing, instead of something to avoid or judge or minimize. Grandma Rose offered to lend me money immediately. She offered to help me update my resume. She offered to ask friends if they knew of job openings. She offered to have me over for dinner every night so I wouldn't have to buy groceries. She treated my problem like it was her problem, like family members should. But here's the thing. I couldn't accept her help. She's on a fixed income. She's already struggling with medical expenses. Taking money from her would have been cruel. But her willingness to help, her immediate, genuine concern, that meant everything. For 6 weeks, I continued this charade, pretending to job hunt, pretending to struggle, watching my family's reactions, documenting their responses, building a case file of evidence about who they really were when tested. My parents never called to check on me unless I called them first. Marcus actively avoided me at family gatherings. Emma kept asking for favors while never offering any support. Uncle Mike made jokes about my situation. Aunt Carol gave unwanted advice. Jessica complained about how my problems were affecting family dynamics. The breaking point came during Sunday dinner at my parents' house. It was early October. I'd been unemployed for 6 weeks. I was sitting at the kitchen table listening to Uncle Mike brag about his latest business success. He'd just bought a new fishing boat. $20,000. Emma was complaining about needing money for her kids' winter clothes. Marcus was talking about his truck payments. Mom was stressing about their mortgage. Dad was worried about potential layoffs at his construction company. Everyone had financial concerns. Everyone was struggling in their own way. Then Aunt Carol made a comment that changed everything. She looked at me across the table and said, "Well, at least Sophia's situation is teaching all of us to be more grateful for what we have. Sometimes you need to see someone hit rock bottom to appreciate your own blessings. Hit rock bottom." My homelessness scare was their gratitude lesson. My fear was their entertainment. My struggle was their blessing count. In that moment, something inside me snapped. I stood up from the table, walked to my car, came back with my purse, pulled out the lottery ticket, the winning lottery ticket, placed it on the kitchen table right next to the mashed potatoes. "I won $50 million, I said quietly. 2 months ago. I've been testing all of you, seeing who would actually help when I needed it, seeing who cared about me versus who cared about what I could give them." The silence was deafening. You could hear the kitchen clock ticking, someone's stomach growling, a car driving by outside. But nobody spoke. They just stared at that ticket like it was going to disappear. Uncle Mike was the first to break. "You're joking. This is some kind of sick joke." But his voice was shaking. He knew I wasn't joking. He could see the truth in my face. Mom started crying. Not happy tears, guilty tears. She realized what had just happened, what she'd failed to do, how she'd failed her daughter when her daughter needed her most. Dad got angry. "What kind of game is this, Sophia? Testing your family? Making us worry about you? This is manipulative. This is wrong." But his anger was defensive. He knew he'd failed the test. He knew what that meant about his character. Marcus looked sick. Actually sick. Green around the, gills. "So all those times you asked for help, all those times you seemed desperate, you were lying?" He couldn't comprehend that I'd been testing their love, that I'd discovered their love was conditional. Emma went straight to calculation mode. $50 million. Oh my God, Sophia. You could help all of us. You could solve everyone's problems. You could pay off Mom and Dad's mortgage. You could help me move out of the trailer park. You could... I could what? I interrupted. I could reward you for abandoning me when you thought I had nothing. I could pay you for proving you only care about what I can give you. I could buy your love since you wouldn't give it freely. That's when the real confrontation began. When the family meeting turned into a family trial. When 6 weeks of hidden truth came pouring out like water through a broken dam. Are you seeing the parallels in your own life? Are you recognizing patterns in your own family dynamics? Hit that like button if this story is resonating with you. And comment below if you've ever felt like your family's love came with conditions attached. The aftermath was brutal, but also clarifying. Like a storm that destroys everything but leaves the air clean and clear afterward. Uncle Mike immediately tried to backtrack, started making excuses about tough love, about teaching me independence, about how he would have helped eventually if I'd really needed it. But his words sounded hollow, desperate, like someone trying to rewrite history in real time. Mom kept apologizing through tears. But her apologies were mixed with justifications about how they were protecting me from becoming dependent, about how they thought struggle would make me stronger, about how they never imagined I was in real danger. None of it rang true. It sounded like excuses created after the fact. Emma's response was the most telling. She got angry. Not at herself, for failing to support me, but at me for not telling her about the money sooner, for not sharing the windfall with family immediately, for lying about my situation. She felt entitled to my winnings, like hiding them was a betrayal of family loyalty. "You could have been helping us all this time," she yelled. "While I've been struggling to buy school clothes for my kids, you've been sitting on $50 million? What kind of sister does that? What kind of person plays games with their family's emotions?" That's when I realized the depth of the problem. Emma didn't see my test as revealing her lack of support. She saw it as revealing my selfishness. She couldn't recognize that family love shouldn't be contingent on financial benefit. She couldn't understand that real family helps during crisis, regardless of reward. Marcus tried a different approach. He got quiet, withdrawn. Started making comments about how money changes people, about how I was already becoming someone different, someone he didn't recognize. Like winning the lottery had made me cruel instead of revealing cruelty that already existed in our family dynamics. Dad's response was perhaps the most honest. He admitted he'd failed, said he was ashamed of how they'd reacted to my crisis. But then he made it about his own guilt instead of my feelings. Started talking about how bad he felt, how this would haunt him, how he didn't know how to make it right, making my pain about his discomfort. Aunt Carol doubled down on her original position, said I'd manipulated everyone. That testing family was toxic behavior, that lying about financial crisis was emotional abuse. She turned herself into the victim of my deception instead of recognizing herself as the perpetrator of emotional abandonment. The only person who responded appropriately was Grandma Rose. She hugged me, told me she was proud of me for learning an important lesson, said she hoped I would use this knowledge wisely, that I would protect myself from people who couldn't love unconditionally, even if those people were family. I left that dinner table knowing I had a choice to make. I could try to rebuild relationships with people who'd shown me their true colors. I could pretend the test never happened, go back to enabling their conditional love, continue accepting crumbs of affection disguised as family bonds. Or I could start fresh. Build new boundaries. Create a chosen family based on genuine care instead of genetic obligation. Surround myself with people who would help during crisis, without expecting rewards. Who would love me when I had nothing to give except myself. The choice was easier than you might think. Once you see people clearly, you can't unsee them. Once you understand that someone's love comes with conditions, you can't pretend it's unconditional. Once you realize you've been accepting less than you deserve, you can't settle for less anymore. 1 year later, my life looks completely different. I bought a house in another state, not a mansion. A normal house in a quiet neighborhood where nobody knows about my lottery win. I work part-time at a nonprofit organization helping families in financial crisis. I volunteer at a literacy center teaching adults to read. I've built relationships with people who knew me before they knew about my money. People who care about my thoughts and feelings and dreams instead of my bank account balance. People who offer support during difficult times without calculating what they might get in return. I still talk to Grandma Rose twice a week. She's the only family member who maintained contact after that Sunday dinner confrontation. She's the only one who never asked about the money, never suggested ways I should spend it, never made comments about what I owed to family members who'd failed their loyalty tests. My parents have tried to reconnect several times. They've sent letters, made phone calls, even showed up at my old apartment before they realized I'd moved. But their outreach always includes subtle mentions of their financial struggles, hints about how lottery money could solve family problems, suggestions about obligations to parents who sacrificed for their children. They still don't understand that money isn't the issue. Trust is the issue. Conditional love is the issue. They can't see that their relationship with me was transactional even before I had money to give. They always loved what I could provide more than who I actually was as a person. Looking back now, I realize that lottery ticket did more than make me wealthy. It gave me clarity about relationships I'd been questioning for years. It provided evidence for feelings I'd been dismissing as ungrateful or overly sensitive. It confirmed suspicions I'd been suppressing about family dynamics that never felt quite right. Have you ever had a moment that changed everything you thought you knew about people close to you? A situation that revealed true colors you'd never seen before? Share your story in the comments. Sometimes the most painful revelations lead to the most authentic relationships. The money itself has been both blessing and burden. I've used it to create financial security for my future. I've donated significant amounts to organizations helping families in crisis. I've invested in education programs for underprivileged children. I've tried to use this windfall to make positive impact beyond my own life. But I've also learned that having money makes every relationship suspect. Every new friendship could be motivated by financial interest. Every romantic connection might be influenced by financial security. Every kind gesture might be calculated to gain access to resources. Wealth creates isolation, even as it provides opportunities. The key lesson isn't about money, though. It's about recognizing authentic relationships. About understanding the difference between people who love you and people who love what you can do for them. About setting boundaries that protect your emotional well-being, even when those boundaries upset people you care about. I've learned that real family isn't defined by genetics or legal relationships. It's defined by choice, by commitment, by willingness to support each other through difficulties without keeping score, by loving someone when loving them is inconvenient or costly or difficult. My chosen family now includes Sarah, my neighbor who checks on me when I'm sick, Marcus, my coworker who listens when I'm struggling emotionally, Jennifer, my friend who celebrates my victories without calculating how they benefit her. These people didn't know me when I was broke. They've never asked about my financial situation. They care about me as a person, not as a resource. If you're watching this and recognizing similar patterns in your own family relationships, I want you to know that setting boundaries isn't selfish. Protecting yourself from conditional love isn't cruel. Expecting genuine care from people who claim to love you isn't unreasonable. You deserve relationships based on mutual respect and authentic affection. Start small. Pay attention to how people respond when you need support versus when you can provide support. Notice who asks about your feelings versus who asks about your resources. Observe who shows up during crisis versus who shows up during celebrations. The patterns will reveal themselves if you look honestly. And remember that changing relationship dynamics is painful, even when those relationships were unhealthy. Even when the changes are ultimately positive. You might grieve the family you thought you had. You might feel guilty for wanting better treatment. You might question whether you're being fair or reasonable or kind. Those feelings are normal. Processing them is part of growth. But don't let temporary discomfort convince you to accept permanent dysfunction. Don't sacrifice your emotional well-being to maintain relationships that require you to diminish yourself. Don't apologize for wanting to be loved unconditionally by the people who claim to love you most. I still wonder sometimes what would have happened if I'd told my family about the lottery win immediately. Would they have celebrated with me? Would they have been genuinely happy about my good fortune? Or would they have immediately started calculating how my windfall could solve their problems? I'll never know for certain. But I suspect the outcome would have been similar. Maybe not as dramatically revealing, but ultimately the same pattern. People who love conditionally don't suddenly become unconditional when circumstances improve. They just have more reasons to maintain the pretense of caring. The lottery ticket is framed now, hanging in my home office as a reminder, not of winning money, but of winning clarity, of learning who I could count on when counting mattered, of discovering that sometimes losing relationships that aren't serving you is the biggest victory possible. If this story has made you think differently about your own relationships, I hope you'll subscribe for more content about family dynamics, personal boundaries, and authentic connection. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it, someone who's questioning their own family relationships, someone who's struggling with conditional love disguised as family loyalty. And please, tell me in the comments, have you ever tested a relationship and been surprised by the results? Have you ever had to choose between family harmony and personal well-being? Have you ever discovered that people you trusted had ulterior motives? Your stories matter. Your experiences help others feel less alone in their struggles. Most importantly, remember that you deserve genuine love, not performance-based affection, not transactional relationships, not conditional care that disappears when you can't provide what people want from you. You deserve to be valued for who you are, not what you can give. And it's never too late to start building relationships based on that foundation. Thank you for listening to my story, for letting me share this difficult but transformative experience, for being part of a community where authentic sharing is valued and supported. I hope my journey toward healthier relationships inspires your own journey toward the love and respect you deserve. Hit subscribe if you want more real stories about family, relationships, and personal growth. Like this video if it resonated with your own experiences. And remember, You are worthy of unconditional love, even if the people closest to you haven't figured out how to provide it yet.